Lords, ladies, welcome to the long distance archery shooting demonstration. And working today with me will be Master Pat, an English longbowman as myself, and Master Jared, our master crossbowman. And hopefully we can show you a little bit about what it means to be an English archer. The first thing you need to know about the English longbow is, it's not English. It's Welsh. We stole it. That was our right. They stole it from the Norse. They stole it from the Scandinavians. The longbow goes back in the archaeological record about 20,000 years. As we move back, you'll see the arrows start to wobble and more arc on them. Arrows, like any other tool, have to file a ballistic arc. Means it has to go through the line of sight twice. I don't care if it's an artillery shell, a rifle, or an arrow. The other thing you're going to notice is the arrows are going to start to wobble. That wobble is what we call the archer's paradox. The string is pushing the back of the arrow, the wind hits the front of the arrow, and it bends. Now this simple stick and a string is what allowed your ancestors to put food on the table. We don't know who invented it, but we believe the arrow, which is very important, came out of something called the fletched spear. You watch that wobble, that's that little paradox we talk about. England dominated the battlefield for 300 years during the 100 Years' War with this. One of the battles was Circe. King Edward of England came upon a force controlled by King Philip of France. When he had the archers open up, he had 20,000 Frenchmen, he had about 10,000 Englishmen. The archers continued, and because of them, created almost 8,000 to 9,000 French dead to 200 English dead. The longbow is so good in rate of fire that Benjamin Franklin and Light Horse Harry Lee had a contingent of longbowmen in the Continental Army. Or I should say wanted a contingent. But the Confederate Army, because of the rate of fire, actually developed a longbow corps. The average rate of fire of an English longbow is 12 to 14 arrows a minute. And an English archer had a man-sized target with 8 out of 10 at 400 paces. That wobble you see is the paradox, and you see the ballistic arc we're talking about. By the way, do you know what the American Indian calls a poor hunter? Vegetarian. Why the longbow works is when I pull the string back, I'm compressing all the wood fiber. When the wood fiber expands, it throws the arrow forward. Notice that we're carrying our arrows on our belts. The back quiver is not period till about the 1600s. The target we're shooting at is about the equivalent of a man on horse. The distance we are is about 75 yards. There's no sights. It's all judgment. Now that's a short arc. You saw it fall short. If I take that same arrow though and put more arc on it, the arrow travels with the arc. Anybody here use a compound bow? Oh, you have training wheels. Anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about longbow while my staff recovers the ammunition? I'll try to answer them for you. If I don't know the answer, I'll make up a good lie. Any questions? Yes, back there or no? Anyone have a, yes, any questions? Yes.
Back range?
Pardon?
How far can you shoot?
Accurately, I can drop with the right bow 8 out of 10 arrows into the bed of a pickup truck at about 300 yards. I'm fairly accurate at this distance with one of these. I've been hunting for a long time. I like eating. Rabbit, squirrel, pheasant. Oh, please don't be upset. The pheasant are winning. Master Archer 28, pheasant 37. I'm trying harder. Next question, anyone? No other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the poundage on your bow?
About 60 pounds. This is English yew. Notice it's two different colors. The wood actually grows this way. It's not been laminated. This light-colored wood is sapwood. This dark-colored wood is heartwood. It makes for a very light and very strong bow. Any other questions? Yes, back there.
What is the string made of?
This one is made of dacron. Strings of the period would have been made of linen, sinew, flax. However, they're very susceptible to moisture. And we have a lot of wet weather around here, so I put a string on here that allows me to keep shooting even in the rain. Light rain, I can keep shooting, where I couldn't if I was using a period string. Next question. Anyone? No other questions? Well,
How long does it take to make a longbow?
you have to it depends on how moist the wood is when you cut it. From the time I start carving a bow, it's about 2 to 3 months, depending on from a billet. You can shape the bow stave with a Blanchard lathe, if you know what a Blanchard lathe is, fairly quickly, but then you have to carve it by hand. The limbs are not the same thickness on each end. Wood doesn't grow that consistently, so you have to follow the grain of the wood. But it's about 18 to 24 months from the time you cut a tree. Any other questions? Okay. Now, the average archer carried 24 arrows into battle, and they were fed arrows. When the longbow was brought back to England from Wales, you couldn't find a gray goose around England. Goose makes the best fletching for arrow feathers. By the way, how do you guys like to see a trick shot? All right, when we come back, I'll try to do it. We call them trick shots because they don't always work. Thank you. Now, Master Jared doesn't shoot an arrow. He shoots something called a bolt. It takes him longer to load his bow because of that. He has to put it on the ground, put his foot in a stirrup, use his back muscles to pull it and cock it. Then he can fit the bolt. He has to set that nut to receive the string, cock it, then he can fit his bolt. Now everyone knows I can shoot 1 arrow at a time. How about 2? Shall we try 3? Simple stick and a string. The 2 properties of wood that make you have a longbow or a wood bow, for those of you who don't want to remember something you had in school called science. The 2 properties of wood are called mo and more. Mo stands for the modulus of elasticity. More stands for the modulus of rupture. If the wood is too dry and I pull it back, the bow would break. If the wood is too moist, it can't push the arrow forward. So you have to dry the wood between those 2 points. Every hardwood has those points. To a point, arrows are interchangeable on a bow. But the strength of the shaft of the arrow has to at least match the poundage of the bow relatively. It's called the spine of the arrow. All of these things go into work. Now, the other thing on science is, why a longbow? Everyone asks normally that question. Well, it's a lever. Think about it. This is a fulcrum. And I make a really long lever, I can move something heavier easier. The shorter I make it, the harder it is at the same poundage to draw. All of these things go into the bow. Cultures all over the world today still use the bow and arrow. Especially Pacific Islands, Africa, South America. In survival school, we still teach you how to make bows and arrows and strings from bark. Now, at 12:30 over here, we do another show. It's a history show, and we'll show you how arrows go through steel armor, chainmail, and everything else. That takes place over at the archery range. We wanted to be out here one time during joust. We thought the moving targets would be fun, but nobody thought so. Boys and girls in the audience, bows and arrows are not toys. Within their range, they're as deadly as a firearm and need to be treated with the respect due them. That fabric is when we miss, and we do miss. We don't want it to go into the parking lot. We don't know how to gut and clean a 74 Chevy. Couple more arrows here. Yeah, hit the fabric. Last arrow. Okay, round of applause, please, for the other archers. And we'll be clearing the target and coming out for the next event. Now, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
Is there much science to the arrowhead?
Yes, there is. If you come to our show over there, we'll explain to you all the various types of arrowheads and why they were used. A question over here, yes?
What are the advantages or disadvantages of the longbow versus the crossbow?
They're about like the same distance, but he has to have a lot more force to throw his bolt. Force is equal to mass times acceleration. His bolt has a lot less mass, so he has to have more force to throw at the same distance. If you notice, the Europeans never used a longbow, always crossbows. Why? In Europe, they were so afraid of the peasant having the longbow, being able to kill at a distance and overthrow the monarchy, that they didn't allow them to have it. Interestingly enough, Henry VIII banned the use of the crossbow in England to encourage use of the longbow. Next question. No questions? Well, I'm coming out here in a little bit. If any of the little ones would like to come up, or the big ones, and see what the bow looks like in that, I'll be standing over here. I'll be glad to talk to you. And I'd like you to remember one thing, though, today. Today is in the present. And because today is in the present, please treat it like the gift it's supposed to be. Thank you for coming. Lords and ladies, we're changing over from instructional shooting. We have about 2 minutes to the show starts, maybe a minute. I want to talk to you for a second while my staff is changing things around. Would you like to hear a couple of good Scottish jokes?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know how you can always tell when the Scotsman is in the pub? Reezy, if a fly lands in his beer, you can always tell the Scotsman. He reaches in, grabs the fly by the wings, picks it up, looks him in the eyes and goes, "Spit it out, you little booger." Do you know what haggis is?
Yes.
National dish of Scotland, a sheep's stomach, stuffed with heart, lung, liver, oatmeal, and steamed to perfection. Do you know what the difference between haggis and a bagpipe is?
No.
No.
If you steam it long enough, you can always eat the bagpipe.
Yeah, what's the difference between good haggis and bad haggis?
What?
Good haggis, you make it to the second trash can.
We don't do just open shooting here. What we do is, while we're waiting, we'll start the show, we give instructional shooting. So if somebody gets a bow or they paid to come out and shoot, you don't just pay for your arrows, walk out here and have fun. You actually go out with an instructor and we teach you, which is important.
And there's nowhere else on this shire that you can get this much individual harassment for this little amount of money.
But while they're starting, I'm going to talk to you. Now, we call this the English longbow. I want you to know it's not English. You know, we're good thieves. We stole it from the Welsh. I guess that was all right. They stole it from the Norths. It was okay too, they stole it from the Scandinavians. This simple stick and a string goes back some 20,000 years in the archaeological record. But what is the advantage of the bow? Well, the bow is actually a very unique tool. When I unstring this, I have a piece of stick and a string. And remember all that stuff you had in school called science?
Yes.
Well, this is a lever. If I make a lever longer, I can pull it easier. So by making this long, I can compress the wood. When I let go of the tension on the string, the wood wants to snap back. That is how the bow works. We start training an archer at about 6 years old. It takes us about 12 years to train the archer. The bow is inefficient without the arrow. Where does the arrow come from? How many of you people in the audience have ever made a spear, gone out, cut it in the woods, thrown at your friends, brothers, and sisters? Come on, adults, own up to it. Kids, that's how we know what you're doing. Doesn't fly very well, does it? Why not? Well, let me tell you why. When I cut that stick and I make a spear, gravity pulls the point down. Wind hits the top of it and it flies like this. But if I put something on the back of it to create drag, it now flies like this.
That was good one.
Now if I couple the fletched spear, how many of you have ever seen NASA launch a rocket? Always has something on the back, right? Creates drag. It pulls the point straight. That's why that did that. Now, if I couple the fletched spear with this little tool in my hand, this is called the atlatl. And if I put that together, I now have the atlatl spear, which gives me another 18 inches of arm. And instead of disjointing my arm, anybody ever see a tennis ball thrower for a dog? Yeah. This is its ancestor. I now have the atlatl spear. And the atlatl spear is what arrows have come out of. And we can kill at a distance with the bow and arrow. And that was really good when we got playing with the English knights, because this is the distance a knight can fight at. Laws and ladies, I give you the tool. A Vegematic. I want you to know this fine piece of steel that he fights with is only at this distance. And it can slice. I can dice. I can make French fries. It's sharp. How would you like to get hit with that?
If you would come forward, please.
Now I'm going to take and hit my hand with this fine piece of steel. How many of you think I'm going to get hurt? How many think I'm not going to get hurt? How many came here to see blood all over my range? I can believe that of you back there for some reason. Now, boys and girls in the audience, I do not want you to try this at home. Go to your neighbors. Let's count to 3. Ready? 1. Come on, let's get it together. 1, 2, 3. Let's make this more interesting. 1, 2, 3. Now, why wasn't I cut? Because of what I had in my hand.
The insurance is paid.
Not really. I had chainmail in my hand. Now, chainmail's still in use today. shark diving, wreck diving, meat cutting, fine layer of chainmail and bulletproof vest. Now what chainmail does, we'll pass these samples around and show you, is it stops the cutting of the blade. Doesn't stop the kinetic force. Chainmail is a simple thing. Pretty impressive the way that sword didn't bite. If I didn't have this in my hand, you could call me Stumpy. How many people here, after seeing that, think an arrow out of a target weight boat go right through a piece of chainmail? How many people think it won't go through? How many want to find out? Well, down there on the target, I have a piece of chainmail. And I'm going to try to hit it on the first arrow. Let's see what happens. I didn't hit the hole. No, I was aiming to the edge. Now, can you notice that arrow didn't even slow down? And everyone says, but that's why they made plate armor. Thank you. Now, you know what's interesting about plate armor? If I take a modern arrow and I hit steel plate, piece of steel plate, I get wonderful, wonderful results. This is a carbon fiber arrow. Now I'm going to put this out in the audience and let you pass this around, look at it. Here you go. Now, I shot an aluminum arrow at a piece of this steel. This is what happens to a modern arrow. Now, that being said, what do you think the most expensive part of this arrow is?
Yes, the lady in the back.
Tip. Blacksmith makes them by the barrel.
There's 3 parts to an arrow. Wood, feathers, and a point. Yeah.
The wood. If wound wood doesn't occur in nature, Bree, you could. Now, if you make an arrow shaft, you have to kern it by hand. This is pre-industrial revolution. How many of you all saw the movie here, Kevin Costner and Robin Hood? So I'm pouring the arrow molds and lashing them into the shaft. I want you to know they didn't do that.
Yeah. Speaking of making an arrow shaft, you would finally get a tree down to a log about this size, or a block, and it's square, as you notice. You put it on a jig like this, get a plane, stroke, turn, stroke, turn. That was your entire job in life, to make round arrow shafts for archers.
Takes 5 skills to make an arrow. If you're an arrow smith, you have to be a point smith, which is the blacksmith who makes points. A fletcher, the person who cuts the feathers and attaches it to the arrow. The shafter, the person who makes the arrow shaft. And the knocker, who reinforces the back of the arrow. If you can do all that, you're an arrow smith.
Not the bad.
I mean, I don't know. Even though we have bows tuned in the key of B. So if I fire an arrow like Kevin Costner did, I get this result. You can pass that around.
Yep, I'm gonna
Now
start
the
this
English
down here.
got smart and developed something called the socketed arrow. Now what happens with the socketed arrow, all the force of the arrow arrives on that point and distributes through the socket. And we held these on with beeswax. So if this stuck in a person or an animal, you twisted it, left the point in, put a new point on it, and you kept the shaft. Now, that I've talked to you about all this stuff with steel, I have down there a piece of steel armor. I'm going to shoot a wood arrow at that steel armor. How many people think it's going to break?
Show of hands, how many people think an arrow's gonna break when it hits steel armor? All right, show people it won't break.
So people want to know.
Now she's using what's called a target weight bow. It's actually a bow about 45 pounds, which is light hunting and a high end of target. As you can see, her arrow is hitting the metal, punching a hole, and then falling out. A bow that it would punch through that metal would be about 125 pounds to 130.
And that arrow isn't breaking. The arrow is the most incredible thing. Anybody here ever in the military? I want to thank you for your service. A lot of ammo in the military, right? Prangable, hollow point, armor piercing, incendiary.
That's just the stuff we got at home.
Well, I have my English archer equivalent. I'll come out here in the audience and share with you. Now, as I pass these around, please be careful. They're not sharp, but they are pointy. Now, the arrow you just all saw go through the steel armor, and I'll start this one here, is called a bodkin. All the force of the arrow arrives on such a small point that it deforms. How many people here drive? How many think you can drive? How many people who drive wish other drivers knew this was on a dashboard?
And how many of you were referring to Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing?
Standard Warren hunting arrow. Notice it's got barbs on it. Now the barbs are to lock into the soft tissue of a person or an animal. Every time that person or animal moves, that arrow bounces up and down, breaks the clotting, and you slowly bleed to death. It's called hypovolemic shock. There's another arrow type called the needle botkin. Now, you look at this, it's exactly what it says it is. It is a razor sharp needle. Now, what happens with this is the archers at night would range you in, launches it up a couple hundred yards in the air, and it falls on you like this.
Now, what she just threw is designed to go through cloth or leather. If it hits a hard target, well, you get a kind of an interesting effect. Instant fish hook. Actually, I think we repurposed it pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it always works well for that.
Went in about that far.
That went into the ground about 2 inches from that little throw. Can you imagine that falling on you in a cloth tent from 200 yards? Anybody here hunt?
Me.
Me. You know what the noisiest animal in the wood is? Squirrels. Yes, ask any hunter you happen to see. A good meal is chicken on the tree. There is no G2. The Army had to be fed by the archers. For that end, they came up with small game rabbit and squirrel arrows called the falling leaf. We'll start that over here, I think. How many people here think fire arrows are real? Yeah, fire arrows.
How many of you have seen a Robin Hood movie where they've lit a village on fire?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How many people think that is real? But we actually did that in real life. All right. How many people think it's Hollywood? Just Hollywood came up with that. How many people want to find out if it's real?
Let's find out. All right, we have to have a discussion to find out. What are houses made of? What are ships made of? Do we see a pattern developing here? What are roofs made of? Thatch, yes, or wood. What do you want to proof the ship with? Pitch and tar. Welcome to Burnable World. Fire is now your friend. To that end, they came up with the fire cage arrow. You would stuff this full of something that would burn, dip it in naturally occurring petroleum spirits, shoot it at something it would stick in, and you couldn't pull it back out.
The beeswax would melt that held the point on. All you would get back would be the arrow shaft and the fletching.
There are other types of these.
So, this is not a curtain rod finial, even though it has been sold for that purpose. We had a lady that was ecstatic that we had these. You would stick the burning material or the material you wanted to burn inside there, light it on fire, and shoot it at what you wanted to set on fire. The other type here has a hole punched in the base of the arrowhead. You would tie the burning material onto it and then shoot it at what you wanted to light on fire.
Now, there's another weird arrow. This is not from Sailor Moon. It is not a turkey decapitator. The only turkeys in Europe sit on the throne. It is not a nose hair tripper. Mermaid tail, shuffleboard. One young man about his age said to me, "This is an electrical socket tester to get out of class." True stories.
Shocking.
Yes. Shuffleboard, weenie roaster,
Marshmallows.
Marshmallows.
Killer, ostrich killer.
ostrich killer,
Turkey
bird
decapitator.
killer, fishing arrow. Anybody have any idea what this might have been for?
Or can give us a new one.
Crotch arrow to cut lines.
Yes. This is the crescent arrow, and it was put on board sailing ships in the 1500s to nick rope, start tears in sailcloth, so would you lose control of the ship. That's what they used them for at sea. You know what we used them for on dry land? It cuts the front hamstring of a charging horse. The horse's leg folds this way. The horse rolls over, breaks his neck, kills the knight, and then I eat well. The horse, not the knight. I haven't got a can opener for him.
Usually had a date code too.
Yeah. Now, you laugh. There's 250 pounds of them. There's no MREs. You ever know what an MRE is? Yes, we call that meal rejected by an Ethiopian because they threw them away when I was giving them out. Now, that horse is my MRE. Now, why? There's 250 pounds of tenderloin. I have hide for clothing, hoofs for glue, hair from the mane and tail for sutures. All of this stuff, I don't know how to waste anything. I can make a canteen liner out of the stomach bladder. I can use the intestine, stuff the intestine with leftover meat and spices and make sausage. For those of you who don't know, natural sausage casing is the intestine of an animal, boiled clean and cooked to perfection.
By the way, over time, if you look at armor, what starts happening is, just because of that, you start seeing horse armor being developed. Because, well, we like the horses, we want to keep them alive, and sometimes the knights on top of them.
Now I saw a bunch of you cringe when I said the horses. I'm going to show you a bamboo arrow point. This is just the point.
That goes on an arrow that's sitting right here. These really long ones that everybody's probably been going, what are these? That is a Yumi arrow. That point goes on top of this.
There are other arrows still used today. This is from Papua New Guinea. This is an arrow. It's dipped in poison. Hold on. Did you have brother check these today?
He's not on shire today, but he's still kicking.
Okay, then he must be okay. Pass this around. This is the length of the arrow. It's dipped in neurotoxic poison.
You'll actually see the discoloration at the tip of that arrow where we actually took the poison off of it.
What kind of bow do you use to shoot this?
That will be that funny looking bow on the far end down there.
How many arrows a minute do you think an English archer has to shoot?
We still gotta do this.
Yeah, the queen has never rescinded the king's order. And it's good to be the queen. Now, how many arrows a minute do you think we can shoot? In a minute.
How many arrows in a minute do you think an archer can shoot? 5.
80.
Okay,
80,
5's a good
no.
start. 80. 8 people can do 80. About 10 to 12, yes.
10 to 12 arrows a minute. Now, does someone have a magic fairy box or a watch that can time us for a minute? And this young man here. Now, you got to yell start and stop really loud.
Yes, we have to be able to hear you up here.
And I'll talk to you while we do this.
All right, ready?
Yes.
Start.
Now, Master Shakespeare spoke about a man called Henry V. We few, we proud few, we band of brothers. He's talking about the Battle of Agincourt. At Agincourt, a force of 5,000 English archers and 1,000 men at arms came upon a force of 20,000 French. At the end of the battle, there were 10,000 French dead. The longbow is the fastest firing weapon in the arsenal of England to the advent of a bolt-action rifle. It is so good, Benjamin Franklin and Harry Lighthorse Lee wanted to get a contingent of longbowmen in the Continental Army. The last person killed with the longbows in World War II, a gentleman by the name of Jack Strange Churchill, who was a commando, did it. The Confederate Army actually was developing a longbow corps under Johnston. This is the power of the bow and arrow. How would you like to be in front of 5,000 archers raining on you like that? England dominated the battlefield for 350 years with this stick and a string. But you never hear of the French longbow, or the German longbow, or the Spanish longbow. Why? In Europe, they were so afraid of the peasants having the bow and being able to kill at a distance, they banned ownership of the bow by the peasants. In England, if a free man made more than £2 a year, they had to own this and practice with it on Sundays. Well, that being said, what did they do for bows? Well, they did a lot of things. Mainly, they hired mercenary crossbowmen out of Italy. And if I said to you this, Marco! Well, why do I care about Marco Polo? Where did Marco Polo come from? Where did he go? China. The giant crossbow was a Chinese invention. And we think he brought the plans for the crossbow back to Italy. Now, the advantage of a crossbow is I can teach you to use this in about 3 weeks. It takes me 6 to 7 years to train you to be an English archer. The crossbow has some disadvantages, though. And we're going to demonstrate that to you right now. She's going to shoot as many arrows as she can. I'm going to shoot 2 crossbow bolts. Go!
All right, while you're all watching, tell me what the bow can do that the crossbow cannot do. Just yell it out. Move. That's right. The bow can move faster. What else can it do? It can shoot faster. It can shoot and move.
Notice I was moving between different sets of arrows and shooting, walking forward and backward. She couldn't move at all. Which would you rather be on a medieval battlefield?
And she's shooting twice as many arrows as I can, and this is the simplest crossbow to load. The next big improvement to the crossbow, the foot loop, about 250-pound pull. I actually, while somebody's running 12 hours a minute on me, I have to put this on the ground, put my foot into it, set the nut to receive the string, and then use my back and leg muscles to cock it. Crossbows got more powerful. Now I can't use muscle power.
Now we have to resort to leverage. You just don't have the sheer muscle.
About 350-pound pulls for these start. This is called the goat's foot. This is the goat's foot, and if I lose this, I have an expensive club. I put this on, I have to brace this with my foot, and then use this lever.
Oh, yeah.
Now, they make another version called the whip.
This is for a little bit stronger bow, but these are the two pieces you needed.
Looks like a tractor spring from a John Deere, doesn't it? Now, picture doing this on the battlefield. I have to put the crossbow down. I have to fit this into it. I have to get the yoke on the string. I then have to brace this with my foot and then use this long lever to cock it. And if this gets away from you, you'd understand why they call it the whip.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, they got wilder. The
Now
next
we've gotten
one,
to a point where just using leverage is impractical. Now we move to gears.
500-pound plus pull. The Kraniken. This, obviously, is the Kraniken.
Yes.
I have to fit this to the crossbow, get this lined up on the string. Then I have to wind this up, take it off, load the crossbow, shoot it, and then load it back. Now, if I have this wound and this gets away from me, Bugs Bunny, eat your heart out.
Break a finger real quick with that.
You think this is bad? They got wilder still.
All right, when crossbows were coming to their functional end, we wound up with a beast like this that you have seen in woodcuts, you've seen it in old paintings. This is a 3-person use crossbow. It's a crew serve weapon.
The tackle crossbow. You all saw the picture with the guy standing there in the old woodcut, the bicycle handles. It's real. About 800 to 1,000-pound pull. It takes 3 people.
All right, the first person that you need is holding an oversized shield to keep the arrow fire off the crossbowman. Your second person takes all that tackle work on and off and straightens it out between every shot. The third person picks that crossbow up, puts it on a T-stick after it's on their shoulder so they can aim it. So it's a crew serve weapon.
Now, what's interesting is this type of crossbow was still in use in World War I.
How far does it shoot?
About 250 to 300 yards.
But with a lot of
But it
power.
will go with a lot more power, and it will go through a steel plate, which is why in World War I it was being used. The German snipers would crawl out from behind it with a steel plate before we had armor-piercing bullets and snipe at the French and British troops in the trenches. The French remembered this would go through a steel plate, and they raided their museums for them, and there's actual grainy footage you can find of them using this on the battlefield.
Wow.
All right. Jared, we're going to give a couple other pieces.
Yeah, a
Wow.
little bit more information about the beast.
Just so you understand what this is, to put it in context. This is the 50 caliber machine gun of the Middle Ages. It's just like if I was to go into battle today, a crew serve 50 cal, this is it. Now, the reason I know this is about the same weight as a 50 cal is because I carried it here, but I also carried a 50 cal in Iraq. This is the same weight, trust me.
How many people here think a semi-automatic crossbow is real? How many think it's good Hollywood? Look for our Kickstarter for the Van Helsing one, 40,000. I'm here to tell you that a semi-automatic crossbow is real.
Now here's what the purpose of that weapon is. It's not power, not distance, it's to be able to offload a lot of poison darts very quickly.
If there's anyone here from law enforcement, this does meet the high capacity weapons magazine ban for the moment.
I'm not telling you about the belt fed up.
By the way, this is a terror weapon. You get scratched, you die.
Now think of this as hundreds of archers at any given time using this before infantry and cavalry comes in.
Lads and ladies, I give you the Chuck no ka. 535 BC China.
The archers would run it out like that. They'd reach in a pouch, grab more poison neurotoxin bolts, drop them in, and keep going.
Now, we do have this here for your shooting pleasure and for sale. If you want to learn how to learn to shoot one, it's $10 for 10 bolts.
If you want to buy one, we have them for sale.
Now, we were talking before about bamboo. You all heard of the Mongol archers, right? Most dangerous archers, aren't they? It's the shape of their bow that makes them deadly. Well, first thing, let's look at their bow. It's woogity! Look at this. Why is the one limb shorter?
They couldn't read the roller.
Possibly. But that's not it. Horsemen.
Horses, exactly.
When you're learning to do horse-mounted archery, you don't want to hit the horse with the lower limb of your bow. He doesn't like it.
They take it out on you, the rider.
Now, what's interesting is, though, the Mongols, what made them deadly is how they built their arrows. They made their arrows out of steam bamboo, which is almost frictionless. Now, our arrows weigh the same, and I'm going to show you what friction does, because I'm only going to use a 35-pound pull Mongolian horse bow, but I'm going to use an almost frictionless arrow.
I'm also shooting a Mongolian horse bow. Mine's 45 pounds, and I'm going to use an arrow that you would have found in Europe back in the day.
All right, this English longbow, this is 50. Same type of arrow.
Same target,
This is the
40.
slowest of the 3 bows.
Draw. Release. Now we all hit the same, but you notice my arrow just boom. And I'm shooting a light arrow. While they're pulling that, I want to leave you with one last thought before we show you the results of the science experiment. We started off talking about arrows being used to take out armored knights, right? What's the equivalent today of the armored knight on the battlefield? A tank! Now, what does a tank shoot at another tank?
Artillery.
Well, the M1 Abrams tank shoots a discarding sabot.
Yes, that's real.
That is the sabot that falls away in 3 pieces. What goes downrange to kill the tank is a 6-pound depleted uranium and tungsten arrow.
Which burns through whatever it hits.
We started off using arrows to kill armored knights. We now use arrows to kill other tanks, and the results of our experiment.
All right, here's the strongest, slowest bow. That was my penetration on that target.
Here's my Mongolian horse bow with a European arrow. Oh, and you can see how much more penetration I got over him.
More efficient bow.
Here's the kicker, though. Here's her 35-pound Mongolian horse bow with an almost frictionless platform. Look at how much more penetration she got over me, let alone over him.
Friction can be your friend or enemy on the battlefield. I want to thank you all for coming to the Archery Through the Ages show. Hope you learned a little bit about archery, and as you go, thank you. As you go forth and spend the rest of the day in the shire. What I'm doing here is making a longbow. Now, to make a longbow, you can't cut it out of a single piece of wood with power tools. The wood doesn't grow consistent across the grain. So what I'm doing is I'm following the grain with this device. It takes about a year to air dry the wood properly. Then you have to rough out the shape of the bow with power tools. You can do it that way. But when you get to this portion of it, it's all by hand. Now, I am not really pushing on that tool, and I'm letting the tool do the work. Now, that hardness you hear is hard bits of the wood, and it will actually chip, and it comes off and jams your blade, so you have to clear it. Some people say, why do you carry a knife? Well, a knife is just a tool, it's not a weapon. Unless I decide to use it as such. But other than that, it's a tool. Now, when you do this, you always carve the handle first. And then carve out your limbs, because if you start in the center and get it so it fits your hand, you can then take everything else down from there. Now, if you notice, I'm rubbing my hand on the wood. I can't see some of the ridges, but my tactile sense lets me feel that. Now that I've got that, the next thing I have to do is shave my limbs on the face. This is called the face of the bow. This part of the bow that faces you is called the belly. Now, if you don't think this is sharp, One of the first things you want to learn after you learn how to carve bows is the next thing you really should learn is first aid. Now, that becomes so smooth, and I don't carve on the face of the bow, I always carve from the belly of the bow. The tool I'm sitting on is called the deadhead shaving horse. It's a deadhead because I have to apply pressure with my foot. Now I've smoothed that out a little bit, and now I look at the wood and I start counting this. All these lines are grains. Now when I'm done carving this, one limb will be thicker than the other. And the reason the one limb will be thicker is because wood doesn't grow consistently in a 6-foot length, which is why you can't cut a bow out with power tools. People always ask me how long it takes to carve a bow. Once I get a bow roughed out in shape, about 2.5 hours.